Hello and welcome to the West Ham Breakdown with me, Jack Elderton, and my mate Callum Goodall. And we've got a really exciting show today. We've got a game. I'm very excited to talk about it. We're going to do, obviously, full show on here, talking about tactics behind the win, talking about the things that changed, better selection, how game state can help us be more successful, positive game state that is, and how rare that's been this season, and the effects of being in a situation where we're defending a lead. So lots on here, of course, a lot to talk about with Freddie Potts as well. But if you want more in-depth chat on the individual performers, which I'm sure loads of people will be interested in today, I'm very excited to talk about Potts, but also Mateus Fernandes, who I thought was brilliant. Lucas Paqueta, who was very up and down, but had some sensational moments in the game. The entire back line, where we've got sort of diverging conversations for different players. All of that is going to be over on Extra Time. And of course, in the player ratings article, which comes out midweek as well, which you can get on patreon.com/Analytics United. You can get a free trial for a week, see if you like it. And if you don't, that's fine. If you do, which I'm sure you will, you can stick around and you get additional things as well. Preview shows, PMPs, quizzes. We played GeoGuessr together as a group, which is always a laugh. There's always loads of good stuff going on over there. But before we do ET and all of that this week, we've got finally. It feels like it's been. It's been a very long time since you and I went to a game together that we won.
Yeah. I mean, it must have been yonks, because we couldn't work out. Well, we know that the last home win that we had as a club was in February, right? And what we couldn't work out was if we were actually both there together.
I'm not sure that we were.
I don't think we were, which means it must have been even longer than that we've together witnessed a win at the London Stadium, which, yeah, massive relief. I think we kind of both just sat there in silence as well, and like the minutes after the game, like just deep breaths. Oh, we got through it, because yeah, it was actually a really fun game to watch, to be honest. But the last 10-15 were particularly nerve-wracking, so to speak, because we were under the cosh. Obviously, we didn't score the third until pretty much the last kick of the game, and it did feel, with all the changes tactically, shape-wise, personnel-wise, which we'll obviously come on to discuss, maybe this is just me being cynical because of recent form, but it kind of felt inevitable that something might happen to ruin it all, and thankfully the opposite happened when we obviously put in the third and sealed the win. But yeah, very relieved, I think, is the main takeaway. I'm pleased, largely, with a lot of the stuff that I saw. Which we'll break into and chat through as the pod goes on. But yeah, feeling very happy on this very cold and miserable Monday. Nice for the misery not to be even heightened, right? which often it has been recently.
Yeah, it's nice to have the misery of this time of year be mitigated somewhat by some decent football. It feels like a while since that happened. It's nice to feel excited to go into the processes this week. Obviously, we do a lot of really thorough work on the team, and when the team is really bad over a long period of time, it's hard to find the motivation sometimes to get into it and look at, especially when the errors are continuous, right? Because we came into the last week's podcast, and I think both of us felt a little bit like, it's like finding new ways to describe the same thing. Yeah. And when you've done that for a few weeks, there's always interesting things that are popping out. But when you start to see the same things happening over and over again in very similar ways, it becomes really difficult to find better ways to describe it, to find new detail to go to, and that makes the process even more challenging in a way, right? Because we have to go into even more detail, look back at other things, find new ways to come up with new angles and stuff. This week is lovely because in a way it was so different. I say in a way, it just was. Everything about it was so completely different to everything we've seen so far this season. We spent the last two pods talking at length about all of the issues that we've highlighted across the rest of this season, which were defending set pieces, striker performance, goalkeeper performance, ability to defend the box. And then we really went into detail on sort of like physical competition being something that we felt was way worse, like it was already a problem. But over the last 2 weeks, it had been so much worse. worse, and that we felt that we weren't really able to physically compete across the entire pitch, which was new. We knew before that there were areas of the pitch where we weren't really physically competing, but it was a new thing to sort of feel like it was a team-wide collective issue that no one anywhere on the pitch was able to physically match the level of their opposite number. How did that feel in this one? Because to me, it felt, and I described this as what was exactly required. I said before, I think it was after the game before Leeds, which I've forgotten who it was against now, that we needed a miraculous and rapid improvement. It felt almost miraculous, the level of physical improvement in this game.
Yeah, 100% that. I think I was particularly concerned going into this game as well, because I think we've made a lot about how that lack of ability to compete in the duels has largely stemmed around the midfield. And when you look at Newcastle, you look at that midfield three that has been together for a long time, and is incredibly physical, as well as just being technically good and really well balanced in terms of what the three different profiles bring. So that, to me, going into the game in our current vein of form was really quite a significant concern and not something I had much hope for. And I was proven really quite wrong, which was really pleasing. And I think it's not hugely surprising. It was still somewhat surprising, but obviously you change the selection, you put players in favourable roles and positions, and all of a sudden you start to compete a little bit more. I think someone with the anticipatory skills of Potts that really shone throughout the game. I think there was several times where we've looked incredibly vulnerable throughout the course of the season, and also the back end of last season, where it was so easy for the opposition to just cut back to the edge of the box or have a shot and it gets spilled out to the edge of the box and no West Ham player there is there to contest that duel. Whereas the amount of times Potts was making the run back into his own box and just sniffing up the ball and then being able to bring it out himself or play it out to the flanks, and we could get away from danger and reset that way. That was a massive, massive help. And just having someone there that can do that screening job changes everything really for us, because it allows the centre-backs and the defence to sort of just get back into shape rather than everyone kind of looking around cluelessly. Very recently, it might even have been in that Leeds game where I think the ball kind of bounces off Areola and everyone's kind of stood there going, who's getting to that? We didn't see any of that, and Potts really helped with that. And then I think ahead of him, you're able to platform two midfielders who have flaws, but are both very happy to cover a lot of ground in quite a tenacious way. I think Fernandes more so than Paqueta, and I think you see that from Paqueta towards the back end of the second half when he's struggling to cover ground because of how tenacious he's been. But it's not for want of trying, but it does open up gaps, which I think we sort of forecast as the game went on. But throughout the sort of first half, just the ability to arrive and compete and contest and snap into duels and put a foot in is something that, I think has felt like a real missing piece when we've played various midfield combinations this season, either because we've tried to play Paqueta as a 10 and he's not been able to sort of just have an assignment who he's going to sort of man mark almost, like his side of the pitch. He kind of had to split both ways. I think giving him a more limited but sort of more specific role really benefits. And then I think also just the speed at which you can arrive when you have the youth of someone like Fernandes rather than Soucek, who is obviously incredibly good at sort of anticipating and covering channels. If it's a case of there's a loose ball, who's going to arrive there first? If Soucek is your midfielder closest to the ball, you can almost guarantee that it's probably not going to be him. Same goes for Guido, same goes for Ward-Prowse when he was in the team. Just having someone like Fernandes who can just arrive and be there. He might not win it, but he's going to make it much more difficult for the opposition player to then recycle possession or progress possession. The chances are, if Fernandes doesn't actually win the duel himself, the person receiving the ball is going to have to kick it kind of hopelessly forward or go backwards and try and shield the ball and return it, and then we can press through that, which is something that we've not seen at all, but something we saw a lot of in this game. So, as a blend of midfield, really good to see. I was surprised that we didn't see Magasa at some point, but again, it's difficult to complain too much because I think by and large, that midfield trio worked a charm against one of the best midfield threes in the league, really. I don't think that's an exaggeration. I think if you look at how complete they are, there are midfields that are above them that, as a trio, I don't think work as effectively.
I think the big thing for me is the difference between what we've seen in previous weeks, which is, or for a long time, which is a domino effect off of mistakes, right?
Yeah.
So one player makes a mistake and the midfield doesn't really have the ability to cover in those situations. You know, a fullback might jump too high in a moment or read the situation wrong in terms of when to jump out and press. We have that in the fullback positions. Wan-Bissaka's been particularly poor on that front this season, but it's been an issue before in terms of an awareness of when to go, when to stay, and it was again in this game. I thought Wan-Bissaka had a good game by and large, but a lot of that is to do with the fact that when he makes those jumps and gets it wrong, in other games there's no ability for Soucek or Irving to recover or cover that space. Same with Ward-Prowse previously earlier in the season, whereas in this game, consistently Fernandes is there, and when he's not there, Potts was. So you've got that ability to react and cover when each other when we make mistakes, when each player makes a mistake. The only situation I felt where it really went wrong as a chain of events was actually Newcastle's first goal, and a lot of that is to do with the centre back jumping extremely high and getting beaten, and then us getting left with sort of an empty midfield situation where naturally Potts has done the right thing. He's filled in at centre back, but then his ability to patch for a Paqueta mistake, which is what then occurs, it isn't there. So that's one moment. But even in that moment, I like the fact that we see here a more confidence, which I thought was expressed throughout the game from the centre backs, to at least try and jump in the right moments, try and counter press better with more intensity. And I think that comes from the confidence you get once you see 1, 2, 3 occasions or more where someone gets beaten, but someone else anticipates that might happen and mops it up behind them. And so there's kind of like worsening effect. I'm not using the correct word, but there's a word that I'm searching for, where compounding, where things get worse.
I was just about to say it for you, but I could see you arriving.
Yeah, through each step of what's happening. Felt like it was massively ameliorated by the selection. It felt like we arrived at a team that could actually work together, work hard for each other, but in a way that stimulated good outcomes. You know, it's not that previously the team hasn't tried to do that. It just hasn't had the legs really to be able to cope with those situations where someone does make a mistake, someone does get something wrong, someone does get dribbled.
Shout out to Igor as well for his lone wolf pressing adventure in like the 95th minute, where all of a sudden I look up and he's pressing the opposition's centre back on the halfway line. I'm like, this is a guy that loves to defend. I think you remarked, you can tell this is a guy that's come through the Red Bull system. Like, what is he doing all the way up there?
Yeah, he was on the pitch for about 45 seconds before I was like, his heart is with Red Bull. Some really energetic, enthusiastic pressing from Igor, which, to be fair, at the time when we've gone back 5 and we're really struggling to get any of the ball and under quite a bit of pressure. There were moments where it was a bit sort of almost 5-5-0, with Soucek dropping in to help us defend crosses. It was necessary for someone to come on and try and be a bit more aggressive in moments. We've covered Potts a little bit. Is there more you want to add? I mean, I tweeted at full time that this was the day he arrived as a Premier League player. This was the day he became a Premier League player. I thought he put in a sensational individual performance for a player so young, so inexperienced at the highest level, against one of the strongest midfield units in the Premier League, in a team that has looked bereft of confidence, bereft of on-pitch communication and leadership. I thought he brought confidence, I thought he brought calmness, and I thought he brought leadership, which is an incredible combination to get out of a youth player.
Yeah, I think the leadership was the main one. The way he was barking orders and sort of pointing at places that people should be suggests to me, he's got the confidence to come in and do that. And I think when you've come through the academy as well, I think you probably have more license to come in and do that straight away, because it's such a cliche to say it, isn't it? But you get the club kind of thing. And I think that gives you the freedom to be like, no, I can bark these orders because I've been here for time and I care a lot more than probably maybe anyone on the pitch. In fact, I don't want to cast aspersions, but like obviously his family have come through the club. He's almost certainly a fan of the club. So I would struggle to think of many people that could care more about the final result and the performance. So I think that's great, particularly when you consider it in the context of how devoid of that we have been this season. It's been a huge absence, particularly in the midfield. Whatever combination we put out, there seemed to be a lack of leadership and a lack of sort of someone to bark those orders. I also think it speaks volumes about his ability to come in and just completely understand the tactical system. Like, you don't go on the pitch and start ordering people about and telling people what position they need to be in if you don't get what the manager is telling you to do, because you just wouldn't have the confidence to shout something wrong quite so loudly, because that's not going to land you in a pretty situation with the manager. Because if you're shouting the wrong thing really loudly, then you're going on there and overruling, and he's not going to want that in the starting 11. But also, you're not going to get much respect from your teammates either if you shout an order that is incorrect and then something happens as a result of it. So having that added in is just fantastic, because I think he'll be able to help everyone around him as well be greater than the sum of their parts. Like, I don't think it's a coincidence that there was so many improvements across the pitch from so many individuals, because you play with so much more confidence in what you're actually doing when you've got someone on the pitch telling you how to do it and correcting you when you don't do it right. I also just think having someone who has the confidence to get on the ball in a sort of metronomic fashion, not trying to punch it through every time, which is sometimes what happened when we were forced into a position where we had to play Paqueta in a deeper role because we didn't have anyone that was really comfortable getting on the ball in that sort of way, but also is hard-coded to look forward every single time. It's like you fix one issue, but then you create another issue, because actually when you need those moments of just, let's slow down, we want to be direct, but we don't need to go forward every single time because actually the moment might not have arisen yet. Sometimes Paqueta would just ping it forward, hopefully, and then we'd end up facing another wave. Whereas I think Potts has that calmness of like, okay, sort of, it felt almost, I know lots of people have made Rice comparisons, I think that's more from the out of possession thing, but to me at times you could tell that this is a guy that's come through the academy system when Scott Parker and Mark Noble have been in the team, like that sort of get on the ball, look up, okay, now I'm going to do a sort of circle movement with the ball at my feet, almost not a pirouette, just that he's going to walk around in a circle and sort of scan the pitch really slowly and just assess, but he knows that he can release at any moment. And I think just doing that, like shielding the ball with his frame whilst allowing all of the other players in the team to get into the right positions so that he has the best sort of optimal option and optimal moment to release, is again something that we didn't have before. And I think the knock-on effect is that you get Fernandes and Paqueta further up the pitch to receive rather than them coming further away from the opposition goal, and therefore meaning that we're kind of stunted in attack. Having Paqueta drifting around in a free roll to then be able to play the incisive pass into Somerville or across to Bowen or into the feet of Wilson is a massive, massive asset for us going forward. And I think just that balance of profiling and what role each midfielder is able to do, because Potts is the one that is able to go and look with his arms out wide to the centre-back saying, give me the ball. I'm fine with the ball coming into my feet with my back to the player. I don't mind being pressed from behind. I know that I'm going to be all right. There were a few moments in the first half where he did that and the touch was a bit loose. And I think that was just a case of, oh, shit, yeah, we're playing at this speed now. Okay, I forgot, sorry. But as the game went on, the confidence grew with it. And yeah, he looked really, really impressive and rightly won the Player of the Match award.
Yeah, Jason Tindall was furious, wasn't he, when Potts lost it on halfway and then did his best. Phil Jones got beaten by Bruno Guimaraes only for the ref to put it back for a free kick, which I thought we were very lucky to get away with in that moment. With lots of moments of bad luck in this game, but that was one moment of very good luck. I think also potentially aging us slightly there with the Scott Parker shout. I'm not sure how old Potts would have been when Parker was in the team, but 7 or 8 maybe.
Yeah, but as a fan, like I was 7 or 8 and watched Parker and would have modelled my game on him to some extent. Not that I have the tech that Freddie Potts or Scott Parker does, but I like to think of myself as quite a composed holding midfielder.
No, it's fair. It's fair. There's a lot to work on. There's a lot to improve. He can grow as a player massively from here. I think the big thing for me, or the simplest thing to explain for me, is that the balance was there. That's the big thing compared to other midfield units we've looked at and tried. There's not been enough balance. We've seen situations where Paqueta or Fernandes have, spent a lot of time helping Potts in midfield today. I thought they were deep in midfield a lot, not necessarily as high as they could have been in another situation against a different kind of team. But it wasn't out of desperation. We've seen midfielders drop in because there's nothing. Paqueta drop in deep because there's no option. There's no one to play to. No one wants it. Or there isn't the confidence from the centre-backs and the goalkeeper to play it to one of the players that's there. So I felt that, now when you're dropping out, almost similar to, how it looked for Soucek when Jacob Ramsey was dropping out late in the game to help in Newcastle build up, and he was a bit stunned because he's not used to playing at striker. He thought he'd done his job closing the six down and made it impossible for them to play through, and then it was sort of like, that's a bit unfair. Why is there now another option to play to? I thought we generated those conditions ourselves in this game rather than it being so telegraphed in terms of who we were going to be able to play the ball to. We had three midfielders who could all take the ball, all confident to receive, all confident to play on the half turn, all confident to find routes to progress, and then also balance from attacking and defensive point of view. Often when we've played a player at the base who has been able to be a bit more, has been able to be a bit stronger with the ball, Ward-Prowse is the best example. We've lost something defensively as a team. And then balance in terms of risk and reward as well was so much better with the ball. I think with Ward-Prowse, we have someone who can help us stabilise in possession, can give us a platform to play. But the risk balance is almost too conservative at times. And with someone like a Paqueta, maybe the risk balance is completely out of whack and is too much in favour of taking risks. I thought with Potts, the difference between I'm going to try and spin and hit it in behind versus I'm going to play it straight back to the centre back was more kind of, I'm going to knock this sideways. It's a difficult pass. It might get intercepted, but I'm quite confident I can hit this at the right pace to play Fernandes, who can then carry with the ball. So just taking out those moments where we would have played back to the centre back, would have drawn the press, would have gone back to Areola, would have gone long, and creating more situations where we could sustain possession, but also sustain possession with territory. So much of sustaining possession previously under a manager like Graham Potter at West Ham was sustaining possession very deep and not actually gaining much territory. Here I actually felt we could sustain possession in the first half and maintain some territory with that, or gain some territory with that, which is really good. So an important performance for the team to find someone like that who can contribute those qualities and do it consistently. It's a big ask now for Potts, but he's given himself a good platform to continue to play. So really excited for him and for us. If Potts was very good coming into the team for his first senior start, I thought Mateus Fernandes, I think at the end of the Leeds game and now then for the best part of a full 90 here against Newcastle, really started to look like the player that left Southampton at the end of the last season, that for me looked like a sort of mega money player, if you like, a player that absolutely couldn't go to the Championship, that had shown too much quality with Southampton, shown too good a balance and ability to contribute in all phases. We've seen him play left wing 10, be a deep receiver, play off the striker and be very high. We haven't really found a consistent home for him. There's been a lot of flux in terms of approaches and ideas. We came into the season wanting to play a certain way. We adapted that across several weeks because we were concerned about opposition strengths. Then we changed manager, then we changed lineups, and different players came into the team, and we tried different things to try and force something better out. In a way, this is one of those moments where and it's not always the case, but fans often have a good idea of kind of what can be successful and what can work and which players should be on the pitch, and finding the simplest and most obvious solution, I think, to most of us watching the team and understanding what a midfield could look like and what midfield could be successful, enabled him to play in the position that we brought him to play in for kind of what felt like the first time.
Yeah, 100% that. I think if you look at even just like stylistically, the profile blend, it's, as we said, Potts at the base as a metronome. You then want someone who is more of a playmaking eight, and you want someone who's more of a shuttling eight. And I think in Paqueta, you've got your playmaking eight. Fernandes, the optimum shuttler, I would say, in this team. It's like Soucek can get from box to box, sure, and he can present a threat in both boxes, both in terms of how he defends his box and how he can crash the box. But the pace and time it takes him to get from one box to the other is a real limiter, because it means that there are moments where you are going to get caught either in transition and you're trying to get Soucek running back to the goal, but obviously depending on who's carrying that ball for the opposition, there might be 0% chance that he's ever going to catch them. And on the other end of the pitch, you might find moments where you're sort of camped around the edge of the opposition box, and whilst it's great to have Soucek up there in the box, unless you have someone around the edge of the box who can put it in there for him, then it's kind of redundant. Whereas I think in Fernandes, you've got someone who, is much more mobile, much more sort of tenacious and energetic in a way that Paqueta actually is as well on the other side, which I think is nice. To have two sort of terrier-like out-of-possession midfielders there is a huge upside, because it just means that the opposition have far less time to do things in the middle of the pitch. And if we're going to try and funnel the opposition out wide and try and defend that way, which we expect to see continue under Nuno, it's kind of what he's always done at his clubs, then having two midfielders that can cover ground much more quickly, force the opposition out wide by closing down passing lanes or forcing certain passing angles on the opposition, that is a huge benefit. And I think we saw in Fernandes that is his bread and butter. He did a great job of it. There was one tension I think that we were a little bit concerned about, which was kind of a hangover of the Brentford game as well, in terms of how Christopher Ayer kept getting pushed up really, really high to try and force sort of overcommitments, 2v1s, 3v2s from our fullback, right back, and then obviously the right central midfielder and the winger. And there were times where Dan Burn was being used in a similar way, and we were concerned about how Fernandes would cope with this, essentially, because there were going to be a lot of times where if Wan-Bissaka pushed up, then the right-sided central midfielder would have to drop in and cover that. And I think we were concerned a little bit just because we hadn't necessarily seen how he would handle such a challenge. And then actually he handled it really well. And we sort of, each time the substitution board went up, we were like, oh, maybe Soucek's coming on here to sort of go into that right-sided central midfield option. Maybe Paqueta will move up front and maybe Fernandes will go to left central mid, because that makes sense, because Soucek's really good at covering that side of the pitch. We saw it under Sofal. But actually, it never needed to happen, because I think he did a sterling job of covering that side of the pitch. And there was one moment in particular, he basically was playing right back and he sort of contested the duel, poked it out for a throw. And that is really promising as well, because we also know that Nuno, stylistically, in possession, is going to want to see the wing-backs, full-backs being pushed up, whether that's Diouf on the left-hand side, whether that's Walker-Peters or Wan-Bissaka on the right-hand side. We know that they're going to be given licence to get forward, which makes it even more important for your central midfielders to be able to cover those spaces. And seeing Fernandes pass the test sort of first time of asking is, really promising, and brings us back round to that balance thing again, right? I think that's probably the main takeaway from this, is that we seem to have settled on a midfield, but also an 11 that seems to be really nicely balanced.
Some big 1v1s and duels against good players, physically strong players and talented players. Anthony Gordon, Harvey Barnes, Joe Linton, Jacob Ramsey, Osula on one occasion. I thought he came through it exceptionally well. You talked about that tackle where he ends up at right back, but there's a lot of filling in at right centre back almost to enable Wan-Bissaka to go out and close crosses. I thought he did that very well. And then there's that situation where he recovers well. I think it's Osula that's dribbling inside the box and he gets back and makes a tackle. Really important one, covers Wan-Bissaka brilliantly. We know Wan-Bissaka's a defender that can sometimes be a little bit too passive. So it's that blend with when he goes aggressively, making sure you're in the right position to cover him. We know his press awareness is not always, it's probably one of the weakest areas of his game, knowing when to go and when to stay. He's prone to getting confused in those situations. So you have to be really switched on to be able to sense those moments coming and put yourself in a position to help them out. But then also in these moments where he kind of does the opposite of overcommitting and he undercommits and he's really, really passive and he lets someone dribble into the box, then you need a midfielder on that side who's got the confidence to say, okay, you're not stepping out, I'm going to go and make a tackle because someone has to. And I thought he did both of those things really, really well. That's without talking what he did going forward, which we can talk about on extra time. I think there's more to cover with him. He had a very, very good performance. Callum Wilson up front, game of two halves.
Yeah, I think that's fair. I think he contested well. I think it was difficult for him to do anything beyond that, really, because the supply wasn't particularly amazing, and also you're coming up against two very physical centre backs. That is just a bit of a mismatch, and also probably have the advantage of having trained with you for a long time in one case, and I don't actually know if he would have trained with Tio at all.
No, I think Tio's this summer and he's gone.
Crossed over, yeah. But still, yeah, I think given the job that we were asking him to do, which for a lot of the time was kind of just backing into centre backs and trying to win free kicks or trying to lay it off to the oncoming midfielders, I thought he actually did a pretty good job. There were obviously moments in possession where some of the decision making or execution of the final action wasn't particularly good, but
that second half for me, I think in the first half his hold up was okay. I think he gave us box presence, although it's not as much box presence as you get from many other strikers in the league.
Yeah.
Some of that. I thought he made some good runs. I thought his movement was okay. I thought his links were good. I thought his pressures were all right. Second half, we changed, right? And we're a little bit, and we're going to come on and talk about this immediately afterwards. And we were a little bit more passive, and we invited pressure, and we wanted to counter, and we had to go long a lot more. It was clear pretty early, I think, in the second half that he needed to come off, and he didn't survive much of the second half. And we see again in that sort of match scenario how desperate West Ham are for a different kind of striker. I thought in neutral it was okay, and for reasons we're also going to talk about in a second, to do with Newcastle. But then from winning game state, I felt that there wasn't much use, to be honest, and it was about trying to find another solution, which we obviously did, going to Soucek up front because we needed someone who could compete physically up there, win a free kick, win a header, something, because Wilson wasn't able to give us any of that. One last thing in terms of our team and what we did, swap centre backs, they were much better. I don't think either of us really know why.
No, I don't think there's any immediate logical take to switching them around other than it wasn't working, so maybe let's switch it up and see if we get anything out of it, and they clearly did. I also imagine there's been a lot of time on the training ground spent just throwing bricks at their heads and asking them to head them, because Todibo in particular, it was like a marked improvement in terms of headed clearances and that sort of thing. Still a few moments where he gets caught under the ball, same with Kilman. Reading the flight of the ball still concerns me sometimes, but definitely an improvement, and hopefully that's a trajectory rather than an anomaly. But yeah, I was impressed with both of them. There was one, I can't remember what it was. There was like a header that is quite low, but Kilman really just attacked it, like both fists clenched, ducked down, and just put his head through it in like the final minutes. I was like, okay, this is a man that has been told to enjoy the art of defending again. And yeah, long may it continue, hopefully, because we really, really need that if we continue to defend like we are.
Yeah, maybe slight toxic relationship sort of thing happening with Wan-Bissaka and Todibo, and getting rid of that maybe stimulated some of the improvement that we saw. But beyond that, I think it's something we'll have to just monitor in coming weeks and get a sense of exactly.
Maybe he just didn't want to see Kilman taking those crazy in possession risks again that come when you have the confidence of it being on your strong foot. It's like, yeah, man, I'm on the left side. I can just run this out and take it. He's like, no. I will make sure you receive the ball on your weak foot and you will have less time to think. You will go long. But no, I think, yeah, you're probably more right with the Wan-Bissaka Todibo relationship.
Yeah, it's slightly villainous, wouldn't it, after what he's done to the fullbacks over recent weeks. Yeah, I mean, in terms of what we did in the second half, I think very clear that we retained structure. We were really compact. We chose not to chase. We chose not to press high. We chose not to try and force anything, really. We know that we're a team that has good players on the break in good situations where we can get away against teams that have to push more and more bodies to try and affect us, to try and break us down. I was impressed with how we defended, really, as a team. It's something we haven't done well enough with when balls have had to come into the box, but I thought we did a good job of forcing Newcastle wide and forcing them to put balls into the box. I thought we defended those situations really well, and that enabled us to show more of our quality on the break, which we haven't seen enough of. You know, we've got in both Somerville and Bowen 2 players who are really, really top in those situations, and 2 8s in the team in this game as well who can really help supply and support, and 2 fullbacks who can support remarkably well as well. So I think there's a really good core there. To be able to perform in these situations when we're in a winning position and we invite pressure. I think we did that well, and I think the focus on doing that well was really good for the team as well. Like, if we hadn't come through it, there would have been a lot of criticism after the game for how much we dropped off in the second half. But having done that and having got through it, that's massive for the team. It's a huge confidence boost to do that against a good side. So big potentially for the rest of the season. Obviously, it's one game. It's something that needs to be converted from this. We talk so many positives. It's what we do when we have a good win. We have to. It's important to. But it's nothing unless it's backed up now in coming weeks. This is the baseline. You have to perform like this every single week. It can't be something that pops up every few months. It's something that we have to be able to maintain. And I think the context is really important here, right? Because Newcastle are a very good team. Newcastle have been competitive in good positions in the league in recent seasons. Newcastle were also pretty turgid in this game and gave us an opportunity to grow into ourselves and to be a lot better than we have been in other games this season. Their out of possession approach, can you give me any rhyme or reason? I know they've consistently used this sort of flat 4-5-1, which has been quite passive. Out of possession, particularly in away matches. It's been a focus of what they've been doing this season and been very obvious this season. That's been something that they've been focusing on trying to do. Eddie Howe said afterwards that he felt that their performance in other away games, even though they haven't had results, I think they're on quite a long winless run now away from home, but the performance in other away games, which is sort of how we felt when we built into the preview, had maybe deserved a little bit more than they had got in games, but this was well below their level, and this was an unacceptable drop off from what they'd previously produced. I thought out of possession, it was mad. We've had so many teams come to the London Stadium, press us intensely. No, we don't have the quality at goalkeeper. No, we don't have the quality up front to sustain. When we're then forced along, the ball's either going to go off the pitch or it's going to go into the duel and we're going to lose the duel. Like, one of those two things is going to happen. Them not doing that to us,
bonkers.
Mad,
absolutely
right?
Bonkers. I think bonkers from the off, really. Before you even knew the team sheet, I would have been baking that into my plan, just because you are faced with a trip away, sure, but a trip to a team whose home form hasn't been good, who have a particularly can get quite toxic in there. I think we all know that. We've all been there, and I think if you're the manager coming to that and going up against a team who before the game were in really a bit of a crisis, to be honest, certainly a crisis of confidence, you go there and you put that on them and you try and make it another day that they want to forget very quickly. Then I see the team sheet and I see Areola in goal. I see centre-backs playing on the wrong side as soon as I see them lining up. I see Callum Wilson up top, so I know that they don't really have an outball that they can use to contest against our physical dominance in the back line. Even if I wasn't planning to press initially, once I see that setup, I am screaming from the sideline saying press those centre-backs, because they're on the weak foot straight away. So if you get anywhere near them, they're just going to freak out. They're going to have to kick it out on their weak foot. And to be fair to Kilman, he's actually fairly ambidextrous. He does well on his right foot as well as his left. But like, neither of them are particularly confident at the minute. And we have seen them both make mistakes under pressure this season already through overconfidence almost, which is unwarranted based on form. So yeah, I was baffled really that they didn't. Not that they didn't go for it from minute one, because I understand the continuity and the feeling from how the performance would eventually come and it would click. But you were presented with an opportunity that I feel like you really could have sort of put your foot on our throat a bit, particularly when you get that sort of slice of luck at the start where, whilst we felt confident because Bowen had just hit the post, the energy got sapped out of that stadium because it was like, oh, here we go again. Our luck is not with us at the minute. You snatch that slice of luck and you go, right, we've got the advantage now. Let's really hammer this home. And I think we obviously came out of it incredibly well, because we took it on the chin and we rolled with the punches and we actually exerted a fair amount of control in that first half. But I think you're right to flag that the lack of any real innovation from Newcastle failed.
Lack of energy. Out of possession. There's a real lack of energy to the way they played without the ball. I said to you afterwards, I can understand this idea of trying to be a little bit more passive, right? Because you don't want to. Something that Newcastle have experienced before is that they go hell for leather. they lose half their players by January, and then they're kind of limping through to the end of the season at the business end when they really need to be winning games because they're in the latter stages of tournaments, and every game is massive. And not that they're not at this point in the season, but you have to build that platform to be there with all your best players in later games. So I understand that to some extent, but you have to then work as a team to be able to at least create the triggers for which you're going to actually jump and press. And we see teams in mid-blocks at least be able to be competitive inside the block and win the ball inside the block, or competitive in the right areas, maybe out wide in order to force the ball backwards. And then when the ball does go back, then they engage really aggressively and step up the pitch and then move into a high press. I felt like Newcastle just had no way of getting out of a flat 4-5-1 at times. Yeah. Once we got through, I know they can press from a goal kick. I know they can press from a throw-in that we have deep in our half, and they can force us to go long off that situation. But if we'd got the ball and Potts manages to turn, at that point it felt like, well, that's it. We can't press from here. There's no way in which we can ever get out again.
And I thought that was a bit nuts as well, right? Like Premier League debutant, really, in terms of his first Premier League start. Also an opportunity for them to be like, right, let's blood this guy in. Let's show him. Like, we've got one of the most physically dominant midfield threes in the league. They've got a number 6 who's making his first Premier League start. Let's go. And you would have thought in my head that Joe Linton would be going and dropping shoulders and elbows onto Freddie Potts and being like, welcome to the Premier League, big boy. Like, but you just didn't see any of it, which was again, another baffling thing. It really felt like it was all kind of set up for Newcastle to come and put it on us, and the fact they didn't was nuts. Again, particularly considering how midfield has been our biggest weakness. I know obviously we rolled out with a different midfield and it worked, but they weren't to know that going into the game. They should have gone into it with the confidence that we can overrun. Yeah,
just totally laid out the red carpet for that group to get comfortable, to grow as a unit and to improve. And that's the thing. That's why the next game is so important, right? Is that whilst it was great that they played as well as they did in this game, Newcastle were off it, and that context is important. And maintaining the level now in coming weeks, where we're going to play teams who aren't quite as off it as Newcastle were in this game, might be more challenging, even though they feel like they shouldn't be as challenging as facing that Newcastle midfield. And it's how you handle that psychologically when you come through a game against a midfield that you expect to find really difficult, and you feel like you've really done the thing and you know what you're doing and you build some confidence. And then maybe you come into a game against a different sort of team where you don't maybe know the midfielders to be quite as dominant, know the midfielders to be quite as impressive, and then the battlefield's more challenging. It's how you psychologically react to that and whether you cave under that pressure, because it's confusing and things aren't working as well as they feel like they should be given what just happened, or whether you react positively to that and assert yourself and overcome that challenge. Obviously, we did a very good job of overcoming challenges in this game. We had plenty, but something that definitely needs to be maintained into coming weeks, given how far off the level I thought Newcastle were. Some forgiveness, maybe, to them, given the injuries they have at fullback, and how difficult that would make it to jump high in situations when it's Dan Burn and Emil Kraft, who only lost the first half anyway, obviously lacking the legs and intensity of Lewis Hall and Tino Livramento, obviously two very important players to that team. We'll speak about that in more depth over on ET. We're going to look at the Burnley game and how things change going into that, what it will look like maintaining this kind of performance in a different sort of game against Burnley. Lots of questions there, lots of questions about how we continue to produce this level going forward. But at the end of this podcast, I want to look later in the second half. It was a very different half of football. The feel was very, very, very different to the first half. I thought we reacted really, really well in the circumstances and defended as a team really, really well, as I've spoken about. Late in the game, we made some very surprising changes. And I just want to gauge your feeling really on each of them, because you've got Tomáš Souček that comes on up front to begin with. When he first came on, I think we both thought, well, maybe Bowen will go up top or Paqueta will go up top, but it was Souček himself. Then Kyle Walker-Peters comes on at left wing. And then lastly, Igor comes on, and we go to a 5-4-1 that maybe Igor knew about, but the rest of the team definitely didn't know about for at least 2 or 3 minutes before they figured out exactly what they were meant to be doing. we were very vulnerable in that initial period after Eagle came on. So for me, that was the one that I took most issue with. I felt that it wasn't smooth enough. I felt that we didn't look practiced in how we were going to deal with switching to a back five. There was this kind of awkwardness about who was covering the right side, so it was quite easy to progress at the right side. We wanted Soucek to be high when we went long, when we had the ball, and then he had to drop into midfield to enable Paqueta to go wider. But because he's quite slow, by the time he was getting back in, Paqueta already was stuck central and couldn't cover that. So then Paqueta was telling him, no, I've got to stay here. You're going to have to go wide. And then that was a longer run for a slower player who was then struggling to get out there. So you're having situations where Newcastle, maybe he's won the flick on, it's gone through to Pope. But by the time he's got back to right mid, the ball's already on the edge of our box, or at the byline, because it's taken that long for him to make that run back into midfield. So I think some issues really with that very late shape in terms of how he defended, and maybe a little bit too much in inviting pressure. Although of course we get the breakout goal, which is the really important thing. The changes beforehand, Soucek up front as an experiment, yay or nay? Or Paqueta's left wing? You must have been gutted to not see Guilherme come on the pitch.
I was sure we were going to see Guilherme. We were talking about it. I was trying to manifest it. I thought it made sense. I even thought later on, maybe as Bowen's legs were clearly tiring, that perhaps we'd even take him off and bring Guilherme on just so we had some pace when we were moving out. We obviously didn't see any of it. Soucek up top. Logically, I see it from an in-possession, let's go direct. We've not been able to actually contest any aerials. We didn't try that much in the first half, but we are going to try it a lot now. We'll give Callum 15 minutes to see, okay, it's not worked. Who can we put up there? I felt really that Paqueta could probably have done the job up there, because I think you don't necessarily need to win the header. You just need to contest the duel and maybe win a foul or maybe force a second ball. And we were doing quite well on the second ball battles this game. So I felt like Lucas probably could have done a job and maybe actually introducing some more energy. Because I think that's what I felt, was that everyone had put in such an effort that it was quite mammoth, and then we were starting to tire, and that's when a lot of the pressure came onto us. Obviously, we did sit off as well, but I think sort of just ground coverage was difficult, and bringing on legs like Magasa into midfield and moving Lucas up top rather than having Soucek up top maybe would have been a better move. But obviously, ultimately it worked, and having Soucek up there did help. However, on an out of possession one, watching my man just chase shadows at 10 miles an hour was just jokes. And I think you obviously get a much very different output from Lou when he's up top out of possession, because he will press aggressively. He might press stupidly at times, but he'll arrive there and he'll force the opposition into decisions that maybe they don't want to make. Tom running at you, scary, but not really. It's like, when you're out at sea and you're kind of like 50 meters away from a massive boat, but like, it's not going to hit me because it's miles away and it's moving so slowly. I can swim out of the way. Whereas it felt like Tom was running at Peleas and they were like, Sound, thanks for moving out of the way, bro. I'm just going to bounce it around you and back in behind you, and then we're going to carry on. So I liked it from an in-possession point of view. I saw the logic, but it added nothing in terms of our out-of-possession approach from a press, I should say. When we were settled, it was helpful.
Exactly right, because he helps us defend the box. Exactly. He helps us have box presence at the other end. He scores eventually the clincher, and he's for listeners, my fingers are very close together and I'm holding them up. He's that far offside in the goal for Freddie Potts, which is obviously disallowed. So that box presence is big. It's really important, and actually I think you see from, even though he's not a natural striker, from a team perspective, how much of a difference it would make if we had a striker we could rely on them in terms of them physically competing, drawing the attention from centre-backs, because then you get a late run from another midfielder who can knock in a rebound, which we just don't see at the moment from the strikers that we can pick. You are right from a pressing perspective. It was a bit sort of like the Indiana Jones boulder scene if the boulder moved at the speed of the tectonic plates. Yes, I know that at some point Madagascar is going to collide with something else, but it's a long way away. It's going to take a very long time. And so, yeah, very easy for Newcastle to find a way to play around him. I think it's very difficult, is the reality. I think you can see the logic to going with Soucek there, and I think it's paid off in this game. It's very difficult to find other solutions that don't weaken you too much in other ways. So Magassa is an interesting option, but then potentially you lose Paqueta's ability to turn those situations around the edge of the box where the ball does pop out from a cross that we've defended into a dangerous counter-attack. Because who's got that ability to receive the ball, hold a player off, spin around, and then hit the striker, and then run forward past the striker to receive, and then play a perfectly timed through ball to get a winner right at the end, or a clincher right at the end. And no one else can do that in the same way. So I understand the want to retain him centrally. And then without that, it's you kind of clutching at straws for other options. Obviously, Marshall doesn't make the bench in this one. I think that's just because of that lack of physical competition that he offers in the duels.
Bowen up top, Luigi out on the right. Come on, hear me
channels. Out. But yeah, okay. So right, that's what I was going to say. That leaves you with this kind of last resort option, which is Bowen and Guilherme, which is more about pace and less about physically competing aerially. And there's a hard trade-offs because in a way, by putting Soucek up front, you kind of got the value of having him in both boxes without the negative of having him and his lack of legs in the midfield. So there were obvious issues that we spotted with it, and some really funny moments, like being surprised by second man drops in midfield, like trying to lead the team out from defensive set pieces,
demanding people like that. I was like, bro, you move quicker then.
Waving at everyone else to get out, whilst I'm watching him wading through treacle, trying to make his way through our half. It's your job to lead the team out now. But I think basically what's clear is whatever we do in these situations later in games, when we have to find a way to hold what we have and push at the same time and try and find a way to get more when we're defending deep and counter-attacking, it's going to be kind of a makeshift solution through to January. And a really clear example, I think, of what happens when recruitment is following on from a manager and a belief that a manager is going to stay and be around for a long time. Because when we went into the season with the players that we had, knowing we wanted to play this 5-3-2, I don't think we needed to add much in that position because of the way in which we wanted to use the strikers. We didn't envisage using them so much as outlets. We wanted to have more of the ball, and we wanted to use them to drop into midfield, free themselves from the attention of centre backs, and play quite simple passes to guys like Mateus Fernandes, who would receive and drive. In those moments where Jared would be able to become free and attack late and utilise the ability of Juve to release crosses and stuff. And kind of simultaneously, a very similar discussion at centre-back, right? Because we envisaged our defensive situations looking so different to what they're now going to look like if we manage to take the lead under Nuno. And if you look at the squad on paper without the idea of this like superimposed idea of system over the top, you would have said, hang on, these guys need a striker that can like simultaneously win a header and run channels, and hang on, these guys need a centre back that can just be a titan in the box and win everything. But that doesn't happen when you look at things in that way. And again, it's one of those points where it's like, I feel like everyone's done their job in terms of the roles that they had to give us the best options that we could and to find a way to recruit in the best way in the summer with what was available to those people in the building. But that wider mission, that wider idea of what we're building, that wider idea of how things might exist in different contexts, if the manager isn't going to stay, this got some contingency planning almost, awareness of different things that can happen, still something that I think needs a lot of work going forward and something that the club can improve on massively to not arrive in these situations where, we're in a difficult patch of form, we've lost a manager, we've changed things, the style is now different, and we are very close to something that works very well to help us defend positive game state and score on the break, but kind of doing it in this very weird way where like almost two of the most important pieces are just not are just not present. So it'd be interesting to see how those situations
imagine when we get
handled.
them though. We're going to win the league.
Going forward, and you've stolen the end of the podcast from me. And if we do get those pieces, I very much look forward to the European charge in the second half of the season coming your eyes. We'll see you over on Extra Time on patreon.com/Analytics United. We've got individual performances to chat about in more depth. We've got Burnley to chat about in more depth, what it looks like doing what we just did, but when the context is completely different, when the onus is on us to try and play and try and control. And we look forward to seeing you for that discussion over there. If not, we'll see you next week.